record now.
Great. Okay. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you all for joining. Thank you in particular to our two main presenters of today. Thank you very much to Andy Ord from Microsoft for pulling all this together. Very much appreciated. And it's very much part of an ongoing program of activities that we have been working on with Microsoft over the last several months, including provision of some training, access to some training materials and resources being facilitated by some of Andy's colleagues. We have a session that's just about to start shortly with another set of training opportunities, so I recommend everybody check that out. Also had some great interaction with some of the Microsoft partners who we talked a bit to them about the Tech Army and what we do, and had some really great engagement there. The focus of today is very much around cybersecurity and the approach that employers take to looking for people to join their teams in cyber. I think very often when people talk about cybersecurity, they tend to think of people in darkened rooms with loads of monitors and SecOps type activities. But I know from speaking with both Scott and John that that they're very keen to give a bit a view of the wider picture around cybersecurity, the types of areas they focus on, and from a technology provider point of view, and from a sophisticated end user organization. We wouldn't want to take too much longer. The only thing I would like to add is that hopefully you're all aware of the fact that we've got our second Tech for Good Summit coming up on the 28th of April. The content program for that is shaping up really nicely. So if you haven't already had a look at that and hopefully signed up, then please do that. We'd love to see you all there. It will be an online event, so you can attend from wherever you are around the country or the world, and we've got a really international mix of speakers as well. So looking forward to that. So with no further ado, we'll get to the main event of today. Delighted to be able to introduce to you Scott Barnett, who is Head of Cybersecurity for the NSS organisation within the National Health Service. Scott and his team are going to be anchor tenants in the Cyber Quarter in association with Abertay University. So I'll ask Scott to kick us off, and John Greig is a Customer Technology Officer at Microsoft, who's going to talk to us about Microsoft's perspective on the cybersecurity landscape. So gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for joining us today. And Scott, I'll hand it over to you to kick off, if I may.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Alistair, and hi, everybody. Delighted to be here. I am, as Alistair says, the Head of Cyber and Information Security for National Health Service Scotland, National Shared Services. So there are 22 health boards within Scotland's NHS. We've got 14 territorial boards and then 8 special boards or centralised boards, things like NHS 24, the Scottish Ambulance Service. We've got our own education, National Health Education Board, which do a lot around training and keeping doctors and nurses and so on, caregivers up to date. And also, ourselves, the National Shared Services. So our role really is to provide some of the core national services that are shared by all of those boards in order to deliver healthcare to Scotland's citizens. If you ever get a letter from the doctor, or you look at any of your medical records, you'll see what's called a CHI number, which is a health indicator. And it's a unique number to you that you're assigned from birth or when you first enter into the Scottish healthcare system, if you were born elsewhere, and you keep that until you pass away or until you no longer require our services. And we manage the whole system around that. Over the last couple of years, we've been delivering at pace a number of new systems to support healthcare throughout the COVID pandemic. So if you've been for a vaccination or you've been for a booster, then you will have been through one of our systems. So the National Vaccination Coordination System that was built, as I say, at pace to manage the rollout of the vaccination at fairly short notice. Good news is we'll be keeping that system going forward, because as well as COVID boosters being likely. We also have annual flu vaccinations, shingles vaccinations, and other things. So the NHS is going to be taking that on as opposed to local GPs doing that in the future. So I think a positive outcome in terms of the systems that we've delivered. And then other things like track and trace, the National Contact Centre, the check-in, check-out system that was used quite a lot in the early days of the pandemic in order to identify trends in terms of how the virus was spreading and so on and so forth. And it's not just about COVID systems. Obviously, we look after things like national screening services. You basically can't run a hospital without screening services being available. And my team's role really is to plan, build, and run those systems, or be involved in the plan, building, and running of those systems from a security perspective. So I'm going to talk to you today just about some of the roles that are crucial to us in applying that security framework that we apply, in helping our colleagues and helping our third parties and our stakeholders to be able to deliver services in a safe and secure manner, and where we're kind of going with that. So what's the direction of travel? You know, Alistair mentioned the cyber quarter. We are establishing a cyber centre of excellence in the cyber quarter. We're hoping to be physically opening the doors there at the end of April, beginning of May, which will be a giant leap forward for us as far as that's concerned, actually having physical premises. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So from a security model perspective, what we do is we apply, I guess, what's known as a classic Chief Information Security Office model. This is something that's evolved over the past few years. We deliver a bunch of services under the auspices of that model. Some of those are very technical in nature, so things like managing the security credentials, managing user access provision, looking after our key systems in terms of privileged access to those, looking and logging and monitoring systems for malicious activity. If we are given forewarning of a threat by one of our intelligence partners, it's about understanding what the technical indicators are for that threat and then going and hunting for them. But it's also about managing risk, and fundamentally that's what we do. So we enable our partner organizations, so NSS and those other boards and social care agencies, to deliver their services essentially within their risk appetite from a security perspective. So, and that's a core phrase which I don't think is used enough, which is risk appetite. So any type of business that you undertake will come with an element of risk. You operate within a threat landscape. That threat landscape will have, I guess, a couple of elements to it. There will be generic threats and hazards in that threat landscape that will affect us all at some point or another. And then there will be specific threats to our organizations, which is based on how exposed we are to those threats and how vulnerable we are to those threats. And when those threats crystallize within an organization, they cause events. And those events are essentially events which should be managed through a risk management framework, because there is a risk that these events will take place. So we talk about inherent risk, which is what does that risk look like to the organization if we didn't have any security controls in place? And then we talk about what steps do we need to take to manage that inherent risk down to a position where it is acceptable within our risk appetite. So if we have an appetite, for example, to protect a database, which has very confidential information in it, say patient care data, we would have a very low risk appetite for that data to be breached, to be stolen, to be misused, to be leaked by a disgruntled member of staff, or accidentally leaked by a well-meaning member of staff. And these are all risks which present themselves as soon as that database is established and is being used in anger. But what does a limited risk appetite mean? You can't have zero risk appetite because that's just not feasible. So we then talk about what is practicable, what is achievable, and what is the sort of minimum level of protection that you would have that still allows you to have the benefits of the system without impacting on your resource availability. So clearly for confidential patient data, you'd be looking to protect that as far as is practicable. And that will then dictate the level of controls which are applied. So I often tell my board that if they were to give me unlimited funding and unlimited resources, I could probably stop 99% of all security incidents across the board. But of course, they have budgetary and resource concerns to weigh up right across the business. So they can't afford to allow me that unlimited resource pot to be able to deliver all of those controls to achieve that level of security. So what we have to do is have a sensible conversation about risk appetite to say, okay, so if you want me to stop ultimately 90% of those security incidents and be best placed to recover from the other 10%, then this is what a security program that could achieve that will look like. So you probably think I'm going on a little bit about it, but it is so fundamentally important to have honest conversations about risk within an organization, because that then sets the tone for how you are going to operate. So within that classic CISO structure, we have a governance pillar, and they manage the risk reporting, the risk appetite, the framework by which we assess risk. They manage architectural standards. So what controls do we have available? When would we look for those to be applied? What are the right ones for our organization to be investing in? And also our policies. So every organization should have a set of policies. Some of those will be around information security and data protection, and they'll govern how you send an email, for example, containing confidential information. You know, what are the steps that you would need to take in order to be able to comply with that policy standard? So, for example, confidential information should be encrypted if it's going to be sent over email. And then there's the core part of what we do, which is the security consultancy piece. And that includes security architects who work with system owners and system designers and project managers to take those standards and translate them into real world controls. And to say, okay, you're going to need a firewall in place for this system. You're going to also need a web application firewall in place for this system. You're going to need logging and monitoring of traffic. You're going to need multi-factor authentication at login. You're going to need database encryption at rest or in transit. Those types of controls will then be suggested by the security consultants and designed by the security architecture contingent within that consultancy pillar in conjunction with the system owners. Again, taking into cognizance the risk appetite for the system and also the inherent threat profile for that system. And then security engineers will configure and deploy the tools in order to be able to secure the system in question. And we have security testers who will be carrying out things like vulnerability scans, who will be carrying out things like penetration tests in order to understand if all of that has been done correctly and whether there are any holes in the security perimeter prior to that system going live. And then at regular intervals once it has gone live and is into production. So it's that plan, build, run cycle is really handled throughout the consultancy pillar. And then the last pillar we have is security operations. And that's really in the run space. That's keeping the show on the road. So that is the eyes and ears from a security perspective of the organization. What type of traffic are we seeing on our network? What type of logins are we getting? Do they look normal? Do they look abnormal? Does Scott normally work between 9 and 5, but he normally logs in from the Edinburgh area, but suddenly he's logging in at 2 a.m. from Belarus? That should set a flag, and that should set in place some automated activities in order to quantify that as a malicious piece of activity or a false positive. So the Security Operations Centre is at the heart of the Cyber Centre of Excellence that we are building. And as I say, it's all about logging, monitoring, alerting. It's about identifying threats, hopefully proactively before they take place. And we do that through horizon scanning, through intelligence gathering and talking to stakeholders, whether they be vendors, whether they be government sources like the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre, whether it's talking to peers, whether it's talking to like-minded organisations in the private sector who are keen to share threat intelligence with each other. We have seen this, this is what's happening, here's what we're doing to prevent it, that sort of thing. So identifying as proactively as possible is preferable, because it makes it more cost effective. It means that you avoid a number of security incidents, and there's therefore an element of cost avoidance in there. And if you understand the nature of those events, those cyber attacks, for example, that can often help in speed the recovery and minimize the response and recovery time in order to get the business back to where it should have been in the first place, or where it was in the first place. We then move into protect and detect. So this is about how we configure those systems to do the monitoring, how those alerts are configured, and how the actions which take place as a result of those alerts are configured. We can't do all of this manually. Within my team at the moment, within the security operations contingent, we have 7 people. We're looking after a National Health Service that has at any one time around about 200,000 people working for it. So we can't possibly manually process every event that we see across our systems. A lot of it has to be automated. And one of the key things that we're looking at the moment is how do we automate that as much as possible? And there's a nascent area of cybersecurity called security operations, security orchestration and automated response, or SOAR. And the idea behind that is that when X happens, Y will automatically happen. So if that login event that I was explaining was to take place and it was to be unusual, the system would identify that. It would automatically send an email to my line manager. It would automatically, depending on how we'd set it, it might lock me out of my account and require a password reset. It might step up my authentication levels, perhaps asking for an extra artifact, an extra factor in multi-factor authentication to allow me access to sensitive systems. And then also create an incident and put that on a system so that that can be assigned and tracked through by a person if it reaches a certain threshold. So that's what the orchestration and automated response side of things is there to do. And as I say, it's a very nascent area. I don't think it's particularly mature in terms of the product set which is out there. And there's a lot of work we need to do with our people in order to be able to harness their skill sets, which is a marriage of understanding what those processes and procedures and thresholds should look like, along with the ability to create the scripts that carry out this automated behavior. So that's going to be a growth area in the future. And then we move across to the response side of things. So we've done the identify, protect, detect. We're now moving into the response side of things, and that is, what happens when the proverbial hits the fan? What happens when it goes wrong and the red lights are going off and the sirens are going and you're getting phone calls to say, my computer's crashed, I've got some sort of demand on the screen for Bitcoins, I can't get access to my files, or the son's been on the phone saying that they've got a bunch of patient data, and I don't know what's happened. You know, we often talk about that first hour that comes in as being the golden hour. And I don't mean, for those of you that are photographers, you know, the time when there's the best light to go out there and capture nice pictures. It's about getting a grip of the situation. So it's rapid assessment of where we're at. We create a number of what's known as playbooks or run books. So we work through all of these different scenarios and we think, all right, what is the set of actions that we should be taking? Who are the people that we should be contacting? Who are the people that we should be getting help from? And we make sure that all of those contacts, all of those steps are recorded and documented, because I always say there's no point in handing out business cards during a crisis. You know, you need to make those connections and understand what you're going to do as far as possible. You know, we don't have crystal balls, but the idea is to be as best prepared as you can be for something going wrong. Because if you, you know, if you prepare for the worst, then you don't have to hope for the best, if that makes sense. So that golden hour is really when the playbooks get broken out. It's when the people get called. It's when the initial escalations and assessments are done. We've got regulatory responsibilities around there. So everything we do in the health service, because we're part of the critical national infrastructure in the UK, we're governed by the Network and Information Security regulations. And that basically gives us a number of regulations which we should comply with, and we're audited upon on a yearly basis. It also means that we have to report an incident within a certain period of time to what's known as the competent authority, which in our case is the Scottish Government's Digital Health and Care Directorate. So that's into the response side, and then that could involve hands-on forensics. It could involve sending people out to machines, or it could be involving giving advice to first responders who are local to those machines and carrying out initial forensic activities to secure data for further investigation. It could be simply about containment and isolation. It could be about literally unplugging network cables from boxes to isolate them from networks if you've got you know, the type of behavior that can spread across the network and infect other systems. And ultimately, the whole point in all of that really is not to define at that point what's happened or how it's happened. It's about helping the business to recover. And the recovery piece is where business continuity plans come in. Every reasonable sized organization should have business continuity plans. And the recovery piece is not the responsibility of the security team. It's the responsibility of the business. So the security team, just like they're there to enable the planning, building and running of systems in a secure and safe manner, they're there to enable the recovery to happen as swiftly and as safely as possible, and to avoid that root cause from reoccurring. And that's an important distinction to make as well, because quite often people think that my team are going to ride in on the proverbial white horses and make everything okay again. Whereas the reality is we don't hold those business continuity plans. We can't possibly know the ins and outs of all of those systems, how they should be restarted, you know, which users would need new access provisioned, etc., etc. And we don't always do that alone. So we will call in incident responders to help us. So we have a retention contract with a government-approved cyber incident response company who will come in and supplant our team with tools and with people and with processes to help us to do that. We're also within Scotland setting up, and you might have seen the news around this, I think it's very exciting. There's now the Scottish Cyber Coordination Centre, or SC3, which was just announced last month. And the idea behind that is that key organisations in Scotland, particularly across the public sector and law enforcement and government, will link up together under the auspices of an office within Scottish Government. And initially it will be around making sure that the right threat intelligence is being shared, the right mitigation advice is being shared and as close to real time as possible. It's something the private sector have done pretty well over the last 10 years. We need to be far better at it in the public sector. So there is now some impetus behind that. There's some funding from Scottish Government behind that. The National Health Service will play a big part in that, and the Cyber Centre of Excellence will be plugged in, and we will probably end up with a dedicated member of staff on secondment to that SC3 that we would rotate on a regular basis. So that's a kind of an overview of the CISO function. In terms of the Centre of Excellence, the idea is to take the best practices, the best standards, the best policies, the best security operations capabilities, and be able to apply those to the other 21 health boards across Scotland. Now, we can't manage their IT for them. We can't manage all their security for them. Our team would need to be incredibly large to be able to do that. We'd probably have to rejig budgets across all the health boards so that we could be essentially contracted to do that. And we're not there to stop what the health boards are doing. Some of the health boards have invested well in people and process and technology and security. And we don't want to take anything away from that. We want to leverage and enhance that. Other boards, unfortunately, haven't had the capacity to invest in meaningful ways in cybersecurity. And that's where we need to provide more services from our service catalogue to them. So we will be doing individual charters with each one of those boards. We'll be opening this Centre of Excellence, and in there we're going to have eventually round about 30 people working from the centre itself. We will be partnering up with Abertay University, Dundee University, and hopefully some other academic institutions as well. The idea being that students, undergraduates, and potentially postgrads as well will be able to come in and do either project work alongside us and work on live systems, sitting side by side with our people in order to really get a feel for what life is like in the real world, I suppose, without being too patronizing in terms of once you're finished at the academic stage of your career, this is actually what working in the field looks like. And being able to apply some of your theories and create dissertation-worthy projects that we'll be able to, we'll be able to collaborate with you on and be able to deliver that. Also some research and innovation pieces. So, we want that Abertay, for example, have already got a really great lab environment. So we want to play a part in that. And again, potentially develop some solutions for us at low cost that otherwise would cost the health service, too much money and we wouldn't be able to procure. And also developing a pipeline of talent for the public sector in Scotland. One of the reasons why we've chosen to be an anchor tenant in the cyber quarter up in Dundee is that we absolutely want to take advantage of the fact that there is investment in Dundee, that the fact that we are no longer in a space where we need to compete with other central belt organizations for talent, because it's very difficult if you're leaving university, for example, or you're early on in your career or even further on in your career. And we put out an advert for a senior cybersecurity analyst. But at the same time, a Dharma or Lloyds Bank or NatWest Group or, Microsoft, are putting out adverts for similar people in the same space. Typically they will pay more money, and not everybody is motivated just by money, but that headline grabber is often the salary expectations. And being a public service, we cannot match the private sector in terms of wages. We do have a good overall package. We've got in my view, an unmatched pension capability. And of course, we have the vocational element of what we're doing as well. And those are the sensibilities that we're hoping to build on with the Centre of Excellence. So we're building a very attractive place to work. It certainly isn't going to be a dark room. It's in the old, in the Hannah McClure building, for those of you that know it, which is being remodeled at the moment, just across the road from Abertay's main campus building in Bell Street in Dundee. It's floor to ceiling windows, lots of natural light. We're working with some really good designers to design a proper hybrid working environment. So you can go into a booth and there's a screen there that you can have 3 or 4 people who aren't in the office involved in the meeting, but 3 or 4 of you can be in the booth having that meeting as well. We're building this teaching environment so that our frontline analyst desks will basically have pilot and co-pilot stations, so that students can come in and sit alongside the analysts and shadow them and look at what they're doing. Not just students, by the way. So we're looking at apprentices, we're looking at existing people working elsewhere in the health service that might want to get into security. And we're going to create a fusion cell capability as well, which is around allowing people to come in and work with us, whether it's for 2 days a fortnight or 4 days a month or 3 days a month, depending on what your organization can allow you to do. And you would come in on those days and work with us, put the Cyber Centre of Excellence hat on, and that would be your duties for that day. But you will take that experience and those ways of working back to your organization and hopefully cascade that thought leadership and best practice from the centre more effectively within those boards and organizations that we partner with. So I think the future is very bright for it. It's not just going to be around security operations, it's also going to be around culture and awareness. So like I say, 200,000 people across the national health sector, or National Health Service. Sometimes that goes up, when during the pandemic, that's gone up to about 240,000. I think a core permanent workforce, it's around about 170,000 at the moment. So that's a lot of people, which we need to reach in some way, shape or form to make them at least a basic level of cyber aware. They are our eyes and ears. They're a first class opportunity for a incredible sensor network. If you think about 200,000 pairs of eyes, if we can get the right messages across to them in the right way, and some of these people are hospital porters, some of these people are literally brain surgeons, and we've got to kind of meet the needs of all of those different roles, which is a mammoth task in my view. But that's one type of service we want to coordinate from the Centre of Excellence. So definitely not about the ones and zeros, but around the more psychological aspects of cybersecurity. The threat intelligence side that I mentioned, so liaising with other organizations, reporting on actionable threat intelligence, being able to disseminate that in the right way to our partners and also into the team, so that the team can go threat hunting for these elements to see if they exist on our networks, and if so, they can shut them down early doors. And then there's also elements like I mentioned, the security architecture side. So understanding the nuts and bolts of how security controls should be configured and how general IT systems should be built with security in mind. There's the security consultancy piece, which is having a real understanding of data protection and security regulations and how we apply them within the health service, and helping the boards to design systems that are safe and secure and are able to comply with that legislative requirement. And then we have the incident response side of things, which is quite separate from the logging and monitoring, the looking at the screens and the reacting to the alerts that are coming in. We need people who are able to carry out exercises, whether they be tabletop exercises or whether they actually be technical exercises, where they're essentially, you've probably heard the term red teaming, but they are acting as the attackers and testing out the defenses of the organizations that we work with, and then reporting back in terms of, okay, these are the holes that we found, and these are the ways in which we can block those in the future and make life more difficult for an attacker. So there's a real wide range of roles in there. And that's before we talk about I guess, the softer side. So, the risk management and reporting side of things, the standards authorization piece, the policy authorization piece. And I'm a big believer, by the way, in right once, use many. So if we can get those right at a national level, if we apply a once for Scotland approach, excuse me, then that will help boards to apply the right types of standards and policies as well. Some of the policies in the National Health Service I've found are, 10 years old and just woefully out of date. So, we've got quite a bit of work to get those all up to the level that we should. And then really a big part of it for me is in partnering up with our strategic vendors. So Microsoft obviously here today, and I'm not just saying that because they are here today, but we do have a very strong relationship with them. We have, excuse me, and I think this is a great thing. We have a national tenant for our Microsoft 365 instance right across all of the health organizations in Scotland. So that makes communication, that makes collaboration far, far easier between the boards than we had even just, 2-3 years ago. We have invested quite heavily in the Azure platform. So we're not just Microsoft Azure. We do some work with Google Cloud. We do some work with AWS. We are provider agnostic, but this is a cloud-first strategy that healthcare is adopting now. We think there are a lot more services that we can deliver in the coming years that will change the very shape and how healthcare is delivered to our citizens. Whether it's virtual consultations with your GPs, whether it's having devices that can carry out monitoring of your health at home and automatically report that back, a bit like the security monitoring, allowing automatic responses from a clinical perspective to take place, hugely exciting. And we're partnering up with some great strategic partners and vendors in order to be able to deliver those services. So there's a whole piece from the security side about keeping on top of that, understanding the benefits of those partnerships and eking out the best security practice, advice and guidance from those burgeoning partnerships as well, and making sure they're delivered on time. I just really wanted to finish off by saying, as a hiring manager, so I mentioned we're going to be doing a lot of recruitment over the next 2 to 3 years. First and foremost, I think it's when we look at people as potential candidates, we look at depending on the role, obviously, but we will look at what type of experience that they have. And that can be academic as well as real world experience. We'll look at also the types of behaviors that through an interview process, we'd be looking at the types of behaviors that we feel that they can evidence. So it's really important for me that we have a real cultural identity within my team. People tend to work together. I'm sure I'm teaching you all to suck eggs on this one, but people will deliver greater things when they act, in concert, when they, not everybody's going to be the same type of personality, but if you can fit the jigsaw together and understand how each other wants to work and likes to work and fit that into the framework of how you have to work, then I think you can achieve greater results. So, we're not looking for shrinking violets. We're looking for people who are going to feel confident enough to suggest improvements, to take initiative. I'm a huge believer in empowerment. I personally, and I encourage my team not to be micromanagers. I think in the modern environment, there's just too much going on to be a micromanager. So I want to empower, and I do empower my team to take ownership and to follow up on things that they're dealing with. And I often say to them, please don't come to the table with just problems. Come with solutions, suggested solutions as well. And some of those, won't fly, but some of those will. And we can have a discussion and a starting point from there. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. If you're going to make a mistake, we learn from it, we move forward. We will never get things right 100% of the time. In fact, we'll rarely get things right 100%, or even 95% of the time. There will always be room for improvement and room for learning. So really looking for somebody who can bring those types of behaviors to the table, who feel that they can contribute to a team ethic, who are open-minded and willing to learn, and who have that, in cybersecurity and information security, I often say, and it is a cliche, but 2 days are very, very, very rarely the same. They might be similar, but there'll always be something that's just that little bit different. I've been in this business 19 years, and I still see things that I've never seen before on a regular basis. So it's about applying that mindset to each one of those individual problems, and breaking it down and staying calm and just remembering that you've got this support network around you to find the right solution. So we definitely don't want, and I haven't come across too many of these, to be fair, but we don't want that stereotypical lone wolf that sits in their bedroom, with their hood up and eating Haribo and drinking cola while they hunch over a keyboard. That's not the kind of team that we're looking to build. We are looking for curious individuals who are super keen to propose new solutions and want to be on this continuous improvement journey. And I think more importantly than anything else, wants to work in healthcare, wants to really deliver great health services to patients, because we wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the fact that we were here to deliver health services to the public. If this was like America and you didn't have a public health service, then our team wouldn't exist. There'd be a bunch of vendors, we provide services, and there would be teams in those vendors, but we would not exist within NSS, and we wouldn't exist as a cyber centre of excellence covering the whole of Scotland. So for me, you've got to be in the game to provide, to enable the organizations to deliver those services, because that's the reason why we're there in the first place. So I think having at least a basic understanding of what the National Health Service does, the types of core systems that we provide, and being passionate about delivering those in the face of a number of ongoing challenges, which are not unique to the health service, certainly not unique to within a public sector context, and I know of some private sector areas where this is the same as well, but we do deal with an awful lot of legacy devices. So being able to apply modern security techniques to sometimes aging environments where that is technically challenging, and you really have to think about how are we going to do this? What are the alternative mitigating controls that we can introduce? And that, it's almost like a maze, working your way through the maze and shutting off any possible route other than the correct route. That is definitely, like I say, it's not unique to the health service, but it's very prominent in the health service. We've got a number of systems that have been designed on old technologies that we can't just flick a switch and change over to new technologies. That has to be managed very carefully, and that will take several years. So all the new systems, yes, great, being built on that cloud first, strategy, being placed within cloud environments, having all the latest and greatest technology surrounding them. A lot of that will be automated and very easy to deploy. But some of those older systems that we've relied on for years, will unfortunately still be running on old technology for a period of time to come. So hopefully I've given you a good overview of what life is like on the front line in my team, and given you some insight into the types of things that we're looking for, that curious, vocal, I guess, type of person, someone who absolutely wants to work in a team, and someone who is invested in what the mission of the organization is and really keen to help them achieve their organizational objectives.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Scott, that's it's fascinating to just get an insight into the breadth of what you and your team deal with. Particularly interesting, I think, for me was just the openness around how you're going about that and the enthusiasm to bring other people into Centre of Excellence. I think that's a tremendous opportunity. There were a couple of questions in the chat related to that, so if you don't mind, we'll just cover that. The first one was about whether project work in the centre will be open to college students, because obviously you talked about the universities, but I think you also mentioned apprenticeships, so it sounds like it's quite an open policy. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we want to work with as many academic institutions and students as we can. So, some of that will be constrained a little bit, I guess, in terms of geography, but with the technologies available to us now, that doesn't have to be a showstopper. But yeah, we're absolutely keen to engage with, and it won't happen overnight, but eventually we absolutely want to be a seat of learning and innovation as much as operational capability. So, if your college isn't involved with us over the next few months, then by all means, get them to knock on our door, and we'll have the conversation.
Great stuff. That's great. Thanks, Scott. That was from Skills Development Scotland asking that question, so I'm sure she'll be onto the distribution list for colleges.
Well, Skills Development Scotland are on our governance board for the Cyber Centre of Excellence, so we'll definitely be in. They are a key stakeholder for us.
Absolutely. There was a question about whether people coming into the centre will need to have some sort of security clearance. So is there a process you have in place to sort that out? Yeah,
I mean, and as you would expect, we won't be opening the kimono, as it were, for everybody. There are certain, and the whole area is designed so that we are able to very quickly lock it down if there is a particular serious incident, or if there's something particularly sensitive that we have to deal with. So we absolutely want to encourage footfall. We want to encourage this, collaborative environment, and a little bit of a hive of activity going on. And we will need to talk. This is why we'll be partnering up with certain institutions, because we will need to have certain rules of the road in place so that certain confidentiality and security is required. It won't be as far as security clearance, I can pretty much say that. But we haven't designed all of the controls that would sit around that. But yeah, there'll be guidelines in terms of what types of investigations they can work on, what types of projects they can work on. Others will just be too sensitive to touch, but
sure.
But there's loads that won't be.
Great stuff. Very good. Final one in the chat was whether you're familiar with tech vets who provide service leavers with cybersecurity training.
Sorry, what was the question?
Whether you're familiar with the organisation Tech Vets?
Not familiar with that particular organisation, and obviously a number of organisations who are in that space. Again, something we're keen, whether it be vets, whether it be people retraining from other organisations. So I guess one of the things we were looking at in Dundee is, for example, Michelin ramping down their manufacturing capability out there. So what does that mean for the workforce, and is there some retraining that we could do? We've talked to the likes of Skills Development Scotland around that. So yeah, I wouldn't want to single out vets as being one area, but absolutely would definitely include them. So yeah, again, happy to have conversations. I think it's an interesting one at the moment. We're providing the Centre of Excellence through the auspices of the National Shared Services Board. So we basically do all our recruitment through National Shared Services. So it's their HR processes that we use, it's their job descriptions that we use, et cetera, et cetera. And currently NSS does very little agency type recruitment. It's very much around direct recruitment. We go out on, LinkedIn and Indeed and, S3 and all of that kind of stuff and look to bring people in. And I think sometimes we miss a trick with that. So I'm keen to explore what we can do in order, like I say, to really develop that pipeline of talent. Because, one thing I would say is I would hope that people will come and work for us and think this is great and they want to be here forever, but that's not realistic, right? So, and I think the National Health Service in general is not a type of organisation where we see the type of churn that you would see in the private sector, for example. So you get a lot of lifers in the NHS, who are there from school and they're there till they retire. The private sector, that used to be the case, but I think we're all kind of, certainly in the services industry, we're seeing that change, and there's churn rates of typically anything between 10 and 20% in your average organisation on an annual basis. I think we'll be somewhere around, hopefully more towards the 10% of that in the Cyber Centre of Excellence. And I think we need to understand that this is not going to be like your typical NHS job for life. You're going to come in, you're going to work here forever. For some people, it may well be. But for those that I would hope we would get 3 or 4 years from them, and we would give them 3-4 years worth of development, and then by all means they can go and with our blessing and build their career elsewhere if that's what they want to do. So I guess my point being that pipeline of talent is really important, because I think it's going to be called upon more and more, just because of the nature of information and cybersecurity and the fact that more and more digital services will be delivered in healthcare. So therefore there'll be a greater need for it, but also because of that churn element, which I don't think the rest of the NHS necessarily has to face into. Maybe the engineering, the IT engineering side of things, we're seeing that, but the security side is definitely going to be different from the clinical side in that regard.
Good stuff. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, Scott. Really fascinating insight. So we'll move on to John Fumé now. John, Customer Technology Officer at Microsoft. I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt, Alistair. I was going to ask if I could come in with a question before you move on, if that's okay.
I'm sure that's all right, Scott.
Yeah, of course.
Is that right? Hi, Scott. My name's William Murray. I'm from Skills Development Scotland as well.
Hi, William.
Digital Skills Planning Manager for the Glasgow region. I just came in from another meeting. Can I just have to get started? But I was just curious about, is the opportunity exclusively for the Centre of Excellence you're building in Dundee, or would there be opportunity in Glasgow as well?
So at the moment, the centre is in Dundee, and a number of the roles we would be encouraging bums on seats, as it were, just because of the nature of what we do, and we are trying to build that very much collaborative environment. There will definitely be some roles that will not be so geographically dependent. So the security consultancy thing, by and large, can happen from anywhere. And we'll be working with all of the 22 boards across Scotland.
Sure.
So actually, our biggest board is Greater Glasgow and Clyde. So we'll absolutely want to have some people who are on the west side of the country and able to operate and jump in a car and go and meet somebody, or jump on a train and go and meet somebody face to face. So we don't plan on building another centre or another physical premises beyond that. We have NSS premises in Glasgow, so we do make office space available in Glasgow, Dundee, Edinburgh, Aberdeen. I think that's all we've got at the moment, but there's probably a couple of other locations. But in terms of what we do, so it's a great question. I think the reality is that most of the people that we're looking to put in the centre, we would look to be largely working from that centre.
Sure.
But across the CISO environment, there is definitely space for those who aren't based in Dundee. I mean, I'm based in Edinburgh, and I plan on being in Dundee probably a couple of days every week, but I certainly won't be there 5 days a week. It's not practical for me to do that. if you're coming from Glasgow, it's a similar kind of journey time, well, maybe slightly longer actually, but it's that similar sort of thing around, you might want to come up 1 day a week or 2 days a fortnight or something like that. So
Sure.
we'll definitely be building a hybrid capability in for the right roles.
Sure. Just the reason I ask is because you mentioned obviously the need to attract in individuals from other sectors who are looking to reskill. Myself and Roz, who's also on the call today, one of the programs we've been running is called Glasgow Code Learning, and that is a collaboration between ourselves, Glasgow Clyde College and Glasgow Life, and that is putting individuals through kind of an 18-week boot camp where they're coming out with a professional development award at level 7 in cyber resilience, having done the level 6 in cyber security. A lot of those individuals are coming with significant work experience in other areas, and a lot of those kind of meta skills developed. So probably an ideal candidate pipeline for you guys. So what I might do is I might touch base for you for a follow-up, if that's okay, just give you a bit of a wider overview.
Definitely. I mean, we will be recruiting quite extensively over the next 3 years. I mean, we've seen it in the past. We've had a couple, and just even in our small contingent now, I've got one of my team members, she's in Preston, and she is looking to relocate to Dundee in the fullness of time. The flip side, which she didn't anticipate, is the property market in Dundee is through the roof at the moment. So whenever she identifies a property, it's almost like she can't even go and get to see it before it's off the market. So, and that's maybe just reflective of the type of investment that's happening in the Dundee area at the moment. But we're hopeful that will settle down to some extent. But so I guess, like I say, there's more than one way. I'll say there's more than one way to skin a cat, and apologies to cat lovers because it's a horrible phrase, but there's more than one way to approach it. So I think the reality is that most, maybe, I don't know, off the top of my head, 65-70% of people would be looking to be predominantly Dundee based, but there's still plenty of opportunity for retrainees and other people in other areas to come and join us. And if somebody's got work experience and then they've shown the initiative to kind of go through that boot camp and they want to get into security, that's exactly the type of personality we're looking for.
Fab, thank you very much.
Cool. Right, conscious of time, I don't know if you've noticed Alistair has been pulled away, so sends his apologies. But John, it would be great to hear from yourself around.
Oh, sorry, John, I talked over you, so if you want to finish your sentence.
No, all good. A warm welcome. So I know.
Oh, okay. Okay, no worries. Well, what I could do is I'd planned on talking for 15 to 20 minutes. I can shorten it if you'd like me to do that, or I can just kind of crack on if everyone else is happy for me to do that. Go through my original agenda. Right, okay. Let me just share my screen very quickly. Just let me know if you can see that.
Yep, all good.
Magic. So hi everyone. I'll sprint through this, not too fast. So I have the tendency to talk far too fast sometimes. But hi everyone, my name is John Greig. I'm a technology lead at Microsoft, and I work in our public sector team here in Scotland. I've been at Microsoft for nearly 10 years, working across a couple of different roles. I came out of university into an internship here, maybe 11 years ago that was, and I worked for another company outside of Microsoft for a little bit with Andy Ord actually, who's on, and I've been back at Microsoft ever since. So myself and a number of others in the Microsoft Scotland office look after our large public sector customers like the Scottish Government, Police, Fire, NHS, where Scott's from, and our local authority customers. My job is, as a technology lead, is to sort of act as the technology front door for our customers into Microsoft. So I'm not an expert in any one field. I sort of cover everything Microsoft does, and believe me, there's a lot of stuff in there. But what that allows me to do is get a really broad view of our customers' problems, and how do we bring the whole team together to help solve those problems. And unsurprisingly, as Scott's sort of really well laid out, is that cybersecurity is one of those sort of major business challenges and problems. So the couple of things I'd like to talk about is, why is cyber so important? Why is Microsoft relevant in cyber? Because Microsoft technology is pervasive. How does Microsoft run its own cybersecurity practice, and what do we do to defend ourselves and our customers? What type of cybersecurity jobs exist at Microsoft? There's over 8,500 cybersecurity employees at Microsoft out of total full-time employee count of about 140,000. So that's a significant percentage of our employee count. And what do you have to do if you want to be a Microsoft certified cybersecurity expert? Because there's a good number of those types of responsibilities out there. And Scott had mentioned that in the partnership with Microsoft, they use a lot of that Microsoft cybersecurity technology as well. So what kind of things you need to know. So why is cyber so important? So cyber threats are all around us, hackers causing mischief, everything from that, right through, everything from that and skirt kiddies right through to organized crime and nation state actors and advanced persistent threats deploying really complicated cyber attacks against companies. And there have been a number of high profile cases of cyber attacks that you'll have seen in the press, everything from indiscriminate ransomware attacks to even serious vulnerabilities in business tools from Microsoft that some of our customers use. And with all of that stuff happening, there's a huge threat to businesses' reputations, lawsuits, fines, companies getting shut down because of loss of productivity, and cybersecurity is therefore a really, really big issue, seen by really senior members of the businesses, from the board and the chief executive officer down. And when you actually look at the cybersecurity landscape and look at the different statistics out there, it was pretty insane. So I think that some of this data is quite old. So so the cost of an average cybersecurity incident in 2017 was $4 million. And that was, not only just for the incident at the time, but that's all the, the related expenses and fines that come along with things like data loss, right? The cybersecurity market supposedly is estimated to be, in the trillions of dollars a year. So this is people, committing cybercrime for a profit. Millions of new types of malware are, on the streets every day. And if you know how traditional antiviruses work, they're only detectable by signature, and that creates, that creates a huge problem. And I think one of the biggest problems out there for a lot of companies, Scott will understand this. I mean, one of the greatest, one of those greatest challenges is 100 plus days an attacker or an organization is in a network before they're detected. And if they're a really advanced hacker group, the amount of damage they can cause in that 100 days is significant. And in the past, companies relied heavily on traditional sort of defenses, right? So having really good firewalls and VPNs and antivirus tools and all this type of stuff. But a lot of things have changed, over the past 10 years. Those traditional IT systems are no longer the mainstream. Loads of companies are using cloud services and cloud technology, meaning those companies don't look after those systems themselves. It's, they're renting those systems from companies on the other companies' infrastructure. And then other things that come along, like COVID-19, forcing, businesses to operate, making people work from home. So now it's really exposing companies that, didn't already have those sort of working from home practices involved. And a lot of that, really exposed a lot of organizations from a cyber perspective. And, there's a lot of organizations don't understand the size and scope of those issues. And therefore, no surprise, cybersecurity skills are in super short supply. So, here's why the kind of black hat side of cybersecurity is such big business. So you no longer need to be technical to, arrange and coordinate a cybersecurity incident or a cybersecurity attack. You can go on the dark web, you can hire a hacker, you can buy yourself up thousands of devices in a botnet and use it to take down a website through a DDoS attack. And if the company that you're targeting doesn't have those defenses in place, then they're going down, and it's going to cost that company a lot of money. So the prices on here for all of this type of stuff is pennies, effectively pennies, to launch these really complicated types of attacks. And so that's why it's obviously really important to have sort of really good defenses. So what does Microsoft have to do with any of this? So Microsoft isn't just the Windows and Xbox company, and Microsoft Office. We've got billions of business and consumer customers across hundreds of internet-facing services. So everything from Outlook, Office 365, Microsoft Azure, you can name it. And what this gives Microsoft is, this huge volume of customers consuming our services, from Windows to Office 365, gives us a sort of unparalleled view into cybersecurity activity around the world. So we have to deal with the most adversary groups on the planet, as our cloud customers sort of bring their problems with them when they come onto our cloud and start using our services. We've got really high quality threat information by the nature of the business that we're in. We're the largest anti-malware vendor in the world through Windows Defender on 1.2 billion Windows devices out there. Actually, it's more than 1.2 billion devices. We're the largest enterprise email provider and the second biggest consumer email provider in the world. So, we analyze about 400 billion emails of traffic every month, 400 billion authentications on, Azure Active Directory and Microsoft account. The list sort of goes on. And when you combine all of those assets together, right, what it really means is that Microsoft's in a strong place to build excellent and comprehensive cybersecurity tools that our customers can use to protect themselves and Microsoft can use to protect themselves and their data. And Scott made a couple of great points in his presentation. They don't just use Microsoft technology and infrastructure. NHS has its own infrastructure. They use Google, they use Amazon, but need access to tools that they can protect that data no matter wherever it sits. So no intention on a sales pitch there. So when you actually look at all of that, Microsoft itself is a cybersecurity company. We're a cybersecurity vendor. We operate a $10 billion cybersecurity practice, with more than 8,500 of those cybersecurity experts that Scott was referring to, and I'll go over the different job roles that we have. And we're committed to spending an extra 20 billion across the next 5 years because the nature of the way cyber threats are going, it's all getting worse. So this is the Microsoft Cyber Defense Operations Center, or the CDOC. It's a bit futuristic or Minority Report looking, I guess, but this is effectively a center where we do coordinated response to cyber attacks across all consumers of our services. And even internally in Microsoft's own systems. So this is a list of the teams that are sort of represented in that facility. It's not an exhaustive list because Microsoft has like over 200 sort of unique cloud services, but we've got cross-discipline teams here in this center in Redmond that man the CDOC 24/7, 365. So some people unfortunately have to draw short straws and work on Christmas, but obviously the internet doesn't go to sleep. Bad actors don't go to sleep or go on holiday, so it's got to be done. But having their kind of this cross-discipline team here allows us to be highly collaborative when dealing with these incidents across billions of Windows devices and hundreds of millions, billions of emails, etc., that are going around. And the team that works to bring down nation state threats and other kind of large cybersecurity incidents across the world also work here. But we don't only do defensive operations here. So Scott did highlight quite a lot of this, but one side to cybersecurity is defensive security. Making sure that identity and access is sorted and firewalls and devices are up to date and all this type of stuff. But the other half of that is offensive security. So we do offensive security here, where we try and hack our own infrastructure, and we use those learnings to sort of patch issues with Windows or issues with Office, or issues with any of our other technology, and fix processes where there's been issues missing. Because cybersecurity isn't just about technology; it's people and process, right? So so we run that all as a kind of red team, blue team operation. And we actually alternate those roles sort of fairly frequently, so that you're not just getting like you get to keep your skills sharp effectively across both those areas. Because I guess one of the key things is that cybersecurity is a really broad career path. It'd be rare for you to very specially focus down on one specific area of it, in my opinion. So I'll probably skip past most of this, but basically this is just us bringing together all those signals and all that stuff that I sort of referenced a couple of slides ago, and we fire it through all those tools that we've got, and that allows our cybersecurity staff to hunt for intruders on our networks and track down global threats and all that type of stuff. But just some interesting statistics. So we've got over 4 trillion files of malware in our malware zoo. We analyze over 8 million different types of compromise each day. And for the types of investigations, customer investigations that we get involved in, we use that and we bank that information with our customers' permission to help stop those things from happening again to our other customers. And very quickly, we do all the traditional defense stuff, right? But another huge part of what we do is secure software development. So we follow that security development life cycle. And so, if you've got billions of people using your software, your software is exploited, in these security incidents. Microsoft needs to make sure that it builds that secure software and it's, as secure as possible before it's shipped. So the types of cybersecurity roles that are available at Microsoft. So a lot of the things I was talking about there are internal roles, and a lot of the things Scott was talking about was internal roles, but we obviously have customer-facing roles as well. So everything from your security admins that make sure our stuff is configured correctly for our own users to use, right through to those security architects who are building these systems and architecting them, and even those penetration testers that perform those red team functions. And we have our own chief information security officer, as you might expect of a giant organization like Microsoft. And so that's all of our internal stuff. And pretty much if there's a cybersecurity role that exists, we'll definitely hire for it. And our customer-facing roles, because so many people use Microsoft technology, we've got to support those customers. So we've got security support, engineers and consultants to help customers build secure infrastructure. And because Microsoft's a product and services company, right? So we've got sales engineers, so that that help understand customers' needs and make sure that we align the right technologies and services to them. These are all super critical jobs. And if you're interested in what different types of careers are available at Microsoft, I would go to careers.microsoft.com. We've got a ton of those are cyber jobs. That there's even other jobs in there that kind of cross those borders, like DevSecOps engineers and some of those types of things. And so yeah, I'd recommend you go and check that out. Okay, sprinting through this. So if you want to get a job in cybersecurity, in my opinion, you ideally need to get some sort of industry recognized certification, whether it's CISSP or Security Plus, or a vendor specific cybersecurity certification like ones from Microsoft. Management and companies know that employees are more productive when they're qualified to do their jobs, right? And it's something that recruiters are looking for to simplify the recruitment and hiring process. And again, I'm not sure if Scott's still on, but I'm sure he would attest to some of those things being valuable things to have if you're being hired into a senior role, for example. So what are the certifications that are available from Microsoft? These are, in my opinion, if you're wanting to get into a job in cybersecurity where you're going to be working with Microsoft technology, the company you're going to work for will probably be a Microsoft 365 customer. They potentially are a Microsoft Azure cloud customer, and they're probably using Microsoft security and compliance and identity tools like Azure Active Directory. So I absolutely insist that you go through the training on these fundamental technologies at the top here. So Azure fundamentals, Microsoft 365 fundamentals, and the security and compliance and identity fundamentals. And then you can use that to go on from those basics onto a particular path. So if you're going to be more focused around end user and data and some of those types of things, Microsoft 365 security administrator, that's a really good learning track to go down. But if you think you're going to be more into the development and security operations world, the Azure security track is a good one to go down. And then there are plenty of supplemental sort of training and learning paths, things to go down on there as well. And so what I would recommend is that the training for all of these is effectively free on microsoft.com/learn. You don't even necessarily have to sign in, but if you've got a Microsoft account, I would sign into microsoft.com/learn with your Microsoft account. That allows you to track and select different learning paths and kind of see how you're getting on and track your progress really well. And then from there you can take the certification exams as well. And if you work for a company, if you work for a company just now, the chances are that you can get access to some of those certifications for free, so you could get your exam voucher paid for. Certainly for all of the fundamental exams that are out there. But yeah, I'm not so sure on the education or on the education side what the kind of setups there for that kind of stuff are. But anyway, that's pretty much me. thanks very much everyone for listening. I hope that was insightful. I didn't speak too fast. I'm conscious many people might be wanting lunch, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions you have.
Oh, brilliant. No, John, you went through that fantastically. Really good progression of information there, guys. Obviously we will have this available, the recording available, so if you do want to kind of rewatch it, it will be available quite soon after this. There's a couple of comments again popping up, Scott, so I'll just read them out for you. Oh, Andy, thanks. You came back to, I think, Doogie, talking about the tech bets. It'd be worth exploring Microsoft commitments when made. Yeah.
We made a strategic commitment to the armed forces in, I think it was 2018 now. So, we've both supported from a digital skilling perspective, but also providing a route to further employment. So that is definitely an area where we have several of our most recent hires are coming through that channel. In fact, some of John's direct colleagues have actually came into Microsoft through that route. With regards to the comments that were made around, I guess, the geography challenge that Scott was talking about, and I think Roz and William made reference. So we have our own apprenticeship scheme as well, that's open to all. We've made some strategic commitments around the skilling agenda and also diversity in Scotland, but absolutely keen to explore as well. I'm sure Scott is on the call today around how can we show up or provide opportunities across north, south, east, and west. I think what I find pleasing around the cyber community is that it's quite welcoming, and usually someone will know an individual if a referral or a joint better together opportunity exists, and that's also something that Microsoft would be happy to support. I think what we can all see from today's sessions, both the insights from Scott and from John, is that we just don't have enough resources coming into it. So being able to fast track that, I think, is exciting. The breadth of expertise that you need opens up a very interesting career route for you. Technology can only mask some of the deficiencies, I guess, that are available in the jobs market. I don't know if Scott's in agreement with myself here, but one observation from the pandemic is that everyone's woken up to the world of hybrid working. So now they're in a position where they can take on jobs that maybe just weren't available to them, or indeed some of the accessibility tools allow individuals that maybe were digitally excluded from certain job roles coming into the market as well. So with that, with that good news comes some challenges, because there's a drain, I think, that's happening across Scotland at the moment in terms of talent, but definitely there's some great opportunity.
It's a bit like the Untouchables, Andy. We'll take one of yours. Yeah, it's like I said. We've got Francesca working in our team who's lives in Preston at the moment, albeit she wants to relocate, but she's been doing that since June. Absolutely fine, no problem at all. And I think we would never have got, and she's a great member of the team, we would have never been able to get her into the team if pre-pandemic we just wouldn't have had the capability to do it. So I think that's a really good shout.
And if it helps, Joanna, listen, we're more happy to share through yourselves, and trust the Scottish Tech Army can distribute it accordingly. The resources and assets that we've got, but I'm sure it's an open door policy that we're all happy to help for anyone who's interested in taking conversations forward. So listen, thanks again from myself and for both the insights from Scott and John. I learn something every time we have a conversation. I know enough to be technically dangerous. So it was good.
Well, it looks like from the comments there's a stream of people in the middle of the qualifications that you've highlighted there, John. So you never know. Hopefully we'll get a few of those landing in interviews for you. So and obviously for Scott as well. So
I'll caveat, John maybe doesn't know the answers to the questions. But
you probably wrote some of them.
Fine, John. Well done.
But really appreciate you know, the time, and you can see from the comments and the warm thanks that you know, everybody's enjoyed that. Is there any other questions anybody has before we close out the call?
Timmy has one.
Timmy, yeah.
How is industry welcoming newbies? Is the question.
That's a good question.
I mean, that is a good question. Maybe me and Andy can field the private sector end of it. Scott, I don't know, maybe you field the public sector end of it. So I think it depends. I think it depends on a few things. I think if you're coming, you know, if you're early in career and you want to get onto some sort of either apprenticeship track or some sort of graduate scheme track, and that covers the sort of ends of you know, college and university and high school leavers, and then, you know, does very broad coverage for newbies coming into the sector and at the cybersecurity sector. I think there was some discussion throughout the meeting on people that are reskilling, and there's kind of specific programs and ways to go about reskilling and retraining you if you're a specialist in a particular field. I mean, I don't know, Andy, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but, you know, certainly for jobs and roles at Microsoft or, you know, another big vendor where they're hiring for a senior person, then obviously they're looking for people with tons of work experience in that particular field or industry. But, you know, for example, you know, even if you reskill and you go back to university, you know, you've been in another career for 10 years, you know, there's no discrimination against getting onto graduateship programs. So, you know, you can still get access to those types of approaches. But, you know, the kind of onerous there is that, you know, you've chosen to do that. You've gone into education. You've come back round the loop. If you're an accountant and you just apply for a cybersecurity job at a company, even a junior role, that's kind of, I'd imagine from a recruiter's point of view, they're going to look at that kind of funnily. So I guess you have to go through a bit of that retraining sort of path. But anyway, sorry, Scott, I don't know if you've got a comment.
You know, I think you've nailed it. I mean, I think we're not very good at it actually in the public sector. You know, I think because there are relatively few of us, and we're a relatively immature branch of the public sector, whether that's in the health sector or Scottish government or the police. So I think that immersion piece, you know, or that induction piece is something we need to be far better at. Typically, what happens is people join Timmy and then they get told, oh yeah, you know, here's all your mandatory training you need to do as an employee of this organization, and we'll set up some meetings with other people and come along to these meetings, and you're almost just kind of dropped into the deep end. So I think it's a challenge for us personally, you know, and for me, it's how do we create that induction journey that gets you up to speed with what you need to know as quickly as possible, but also, you know, point to the areas which you can go off and explore on your own. So, and, you know, I'm an Aberdeen boy, so I'm very, very keenly aware of what's going on in that area. You know, we've certainly talked to a couple of people about potentially joining us in Dundee, you know, same like I was talking about Michelin up in Dundee. You know, there's a lot of people I think are going to have to reskill in general, not just from a cyber perspective, but, you know, we know that there are massive gaps, as Andy mentioned, in terms of people in this space. So we've got to work with the likes of Skills Development Scotland and other partners to not take advantage, but, you know, to see the silver lining and those big clouds in terms of industry transformation and you know, employment transformation in terms of those sectors. So
yeah.
Just to give you, sorry, I was going to give a just an example on that, Joanna. Sorry to come in, but
yeah, no worries.
My partner's actually he's a mental health officer, a mental health social worker, and he's been doing that for 10 years. But since I've been doing the job that I'm doing at Skills Development Scotland, he's become very aware of the scale of opportunity within the tech sector, and he actually is doing the Glasgow Code Learning Programme at the moment in cybersecurity. But for him, I suppose he's actually spent, you know, he's already done 5 years at university. He's at the top of his pay scale. So making that sideways move into an apprenticeship program isn't something that he feels he's capable of. He would be able to do just financially, but is having those, for example, one of the things that I've kind of said to him is, when you're responding to, if you need to go out to a hospital, that's crisis management, you're responding to an emergency situation, etc. These are all the meta skills that take a long time to develop for a new graduate coming into the sector. For someone like that who's doing a professional development award at level 7 in cyber resilience or cyber security, is there a kind of benchmarking framework whereby individuals like that can come in and start learning on the job rather than going back into another 4-year program? Because that will deter people who are going to be moving from other sectors. Does that make sense, Scott?
No, it 100% makes sense. And I guess, from our perspective, we wouldn't be looking to do that. So we would be looking to bring people in, if you're in the role, you're in the role kind of thing. So, if it was the likes of your partner and he was coming in and saying, right, actually, I'm bringing all these things to the table. Obviously, at that point, we've decided that that's attractive for us, and that would enhance our team. So I think the onus on for us then is to bring him up to speed with the experience that exists within the team in terms of, and him to cascade his experience across the team. Flip side happens, as I'm sure you're aware. We get some people either fresh out of school or fresh out of college or fresh out of uni who just don't have the experience of these incidents in the real world. So when you say to them, oh, you need to stay calm, stay cool in the penalty box, that kind of thing, they've just not experienced that, whereas he will have, just in a different environment. But it's the same principle. It's the same when I was doing armed surveillance work in the police. It's all the same mindset and skill sets that you're applying. You've just got to think about how we bring those together. So we definitely wouldn't be going, right, you're in here, you're almost starting from scratch. It might be that the reality is the way we're currently set up, and this is where you mentioned benchmarking. This is where I think we need to be a bit smarter in the future, and I don't know the answers as to how we get there, but it's how we look at those desirables and not just focus on certifications or qualifications. They are obviously very important, and at some point you need to get those, but it's like, do you need to have those before you're considered for a job, or actually could we consider you for a job and then get you those? That's the kind of amalgam I think we need to meet, and we're not very good at it at the moment, if I'm honest.
Yeah, and Timmy, wait, sorry, I just want to go back to Timmy because we are going to run out of time. Timmy, there are a number of people in the Tech Army who have already completed that journey and got jobs. So more than happy to connect you to them, to what went well, what worked for them, and what sort of where they finished. We also offer people time to help us with some of the digital competence training, and one of those sessions is specifically on security. So it gives you the opportunity to talk confidently and practice teaching people who know nothing that beginning common language. How do you talk and not talk in jargon, if you know what I mean? So there's opportunities for you to practice some stuff, which obviously all helps with interviews. So you don't sound like a dictionary when you turn up. You've kind of shown that you've understood it and you can talk about it eloquently.
I thought you were going to say something different there, Joanna, when you said you don't sound like a but it was dictionary rather than
Thank you very much.
I should have paused better, more for comedy timing, but yeah, it'd be lovely to help you with that journey, Timmy, because it can feel daunting when you start, but equally great points there around that benchmarking and not starting from scratch when you retrain, William. So I think it's a fun challenge for many job switches. I'm conscious that we're over time, guys, and I'm pretty sure we could keep going with a lot more questions. That's been a really rich discussion in terms of content, so thanks all of you. I'm sure we'll be trying to drag you back for future talks, so really appreciate your time, and great to hear the stuff going on. There is a hell of a lot of stuff going on. Timmy, the only other thing actually I was going to mention is there's a lot of stuff happening with groups like the Scottish Business Resilience Centre. There's a lot of courses, there's a lot of awareness. Keep an eye on these things because they're good kind of common knowledge of what's happening. So that there's a real push. We've been working with Ros for a bit and the team to sort of raise awareness. So do keep an eye on some of those groups as well. Brilliant. Thanks everybody.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good day.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.